Let's talk to Anthony Day and find out what all this carbon offsetting business is all about, because it seems like a bit of a racket to me. Anthony, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very well. Thanks for joining us. I've found this carbon offsetting company that Elton's referring to, Carbon Footprint, seems to have a limited company address up in Islington somewhere, N1. And I looked at it. It looks like if you wanted to fly, say, for example, down to Marbella from London, the carbon offset for that for a first-class ticket is about £800. How do they come up with that money, and where does it go?
Well, I don't know how they come up with the money, but where it goes, if you look at their website, it goes to a whole range of projects across the world, which are aimed at cutting carbon emissions. Planting trees is one of the main ones, providing people with clean water so they don't have to burn wood and create carbon emissions to boil the water, providing people with clean cooking stoves so they cut emissions there. They do it across the world. They are authorised and they are checked by international standards organisations. So that's where the money goes.
Right. Well, so how much, for example, would it cost to plant a tree? If I said to this lot, I'd like to plant a tree somewhere in the world, not carbon offsetting anything, I just want to plant a tree, how much does that cost?
I don't know, but I wouldn't have thought it would cost a great deal. I think it might cost a couple of quid, probably even less than that. I mean, one country planted 220 million trees in a week a couple of weeks ago, so They can't cost an awful lot.
Right, no, exactly right. Well, I wish they'd come here, whoever was able to do that, because we can't seem to get the trains running on time. I mean, if you plant that many trees in a week, that's pretty good going. But it just seems to me this is a little bit of a hypocritical situation we're looking at here. I've got plenty of time for people who say to me, look, we need to save the world. It would be a really good idea if you stopped flying quite as much as you do. But to be wealthy enough to just say, you know what, I'm going to fly wherever I like, but as long as I pay some money to some spurious company somewhere in Islington, I'll feel fine about it.
Okay, yes, it's a bit hypocritical. I don't know that the company is spurious. You're quite right, there have been offset scams. There have been schemes that didn't work. This one looks quite good. Ideally, we should send all the money out to reduce carbon emissions and not fly. But,
well, exactly.
That's what I'm saying. What the world will do.
I mean, I wouldn't agree with you that we shouldn't fly anywhere, but if you had that point of view, and I'm sure you may well have it, I'd be perfectly happy to let you have that view, and I would respect it. But what I wouldn't respect is if you told everybody else that we really shouldn't fly, and then you went and got straight on a private jet and flew off to Madagascar.
Okay, yes, all right, so that's hypocritical, but it doesn't change the science. We still have a climate crisis.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about today, Anthony. We're talking about the fact that people who are very hypocritical, for example, I mean, look at the boat trip currently being taken to New York by Greta and her father and a few other people. They're flying people to New York so that they can bring the boat back here. I mean, that seems to me to be a bit of a waste of time.
Right, but the climate crisis is far more important than the hypocrisy.
Oh, is it?
Absolutely.
Oh, I see.
The climate crisis is going to affect every one of us.
So I can be as hypocritical about it as I want then and just keep talking about there being a climate crisis. As long as I keep talking about it, that's fine.
Well, I don't say that's fine, but it doesn't change the science. It doesn't change.
Well, you've just said the hypocrisy is less important than the emergency. So therefore, if we all carry on being...
we've got to deal with the emergency, not with
Yes,
but
do you not see that if you're a hypocrite, you're not dealing with the emergency?
Right. Well, let's accept there are some hypocrites, because there are a lot of people who are not hypocrites, and they are dealing with it, and we've got to deal with it, whether we're hypocrites or not.
Well, I saw a guy from Extinction Rebellion being interviewed on television the other day who said that 6 billion people were going to be wiped off the face of the earth within the next 20 or 30 years, which is clearly nonsense.
Well, yeah, may well be.
May well be. Well, it's quite a dramatic statement to make. I mean, but this is the statement that's being made by the people who say the science is very clear.
Right. Well, I didn't think it was that clear.
I don't think it is.
To see that many people wiped off. It's a possibility. I mean, we could see 20 or 30 million people wiped off the Earth, or whatever the figure was, 6 billion.
6 billion,
the Earth. Yeah, we could see that if, for example, we get some sort of virus or disease which we can't cope with. Well, you can't predict that.
No, of course you can't. But that's my point. I mean, that's always my point when we have this conversation, that there's a lot that you can't predict, and there is a lot that you can't foresee, and there is a lot that you cannot absolutely and utterly prove.
Quite right. But as far as the climate is concerned, as opposed to diseases and things like that, the predictions are pretty certain.
Well, they're predictions, though, aren't they? You can't have a certain prediction until you know what's happened.
Right, but if you wait until see what's happened, it could be too late.
It could be, but all I'm saying is you can't be sure that you will be right.
You can't.
But, no. So therefore, it's not actually a climate emergency. It might be a climate emergency.
Well, the government's decided it's an emergency.
The government can't decide whether they can leave the European Union or not, never mind what the future of the world holds for us.
Well, we could talk about the government for ages, but but they have decided there's a climate crisis. They have decided that things have got to be done to reduce carbon emissions by 2050, and there are things that have got to be done to protect the country against the effects of climate change by 2050. So, it's generally accepted that we.
You see, there's that phrase. I'm not going to let you get away with that. It's generally accepted. I don't accept that is generally accepted at all. There's plenty of people who don't generally accept it. And even if everybody did generally accept it, it is not any way to run a country just because an awful lot of people agree with you.
It's generally accepted by the scientific community that we have a climate crisis. And the government believes that we should therefore prudently take steps to mitigate and reduce the consequences of that climate crisis.
They do, and they have, and all of that is correct. And the reason you can say all that with absolute surety is because it's happened, because people have made decisions, taken action, and things have been done in the past and are being done today, which are supposed to be averting the climate crisis. But what you can't say with any surety is whether it will have any effect.
No, I'm going to pick you up on that. They're saying things should be done. They're not doing them. I mean, if you look at the Climate Change Committee report, it says the government has identified 25 actions that should be taken, and they're only delivered on one.
Well, do you know what? I was talking to somebody about the National Grid yesterday, and one of the reasons the National Grid is in such a parlous condition is because of all the green mechanisms they have put into the system to make sure that we are much less carbon heavy when we generate electricity in this country. So it's wrong to say that things are not being done. There are many things being done. We're also paying a tax to every single energy company that we get energy from, which is a green tax supposed to be offsetting climate change. We're also paying a massive airport tax whenever we fly on a plane from this country. So don't say we're not doing anything.
Well, I'm not saying we're doing anything, and we're not doing nearly enough, though. We're not doing nearly enough.
Well, I mean, what else should we be doing?
Well, one of the things we should be doing is insulating every home in the country to cut its emissions by half, to cut its heating costs by half. That'll reduce fuel poverty. It'll also create jobs. We should be looking to electrifying the transport fleet and getting rid of fossil-fueled vehicles which produce carbon emissions. Things like that. I mean, radical things, which unfortunately are going to be pretty horrendous, but they should have been started 30 years ago because the science was there then.
Well, who's going to pay for all this, though?
Well, we're going to have to.
Well, who, though?
Well,
we want me to pay for it.
We'll need to pay for it.
We, as in what? The taxpayer?
Well, and the consumer, yeah. Because otherwise,
we already pay a green tax for our energy, right? What's that being used for?
Probably to subsidise nuclear, because nuclear is seen as emissions-free.
No, but the point is that, Anthony, you're a man who knows about sustainable futures. You present a podcast, but you don't seem to know where any of the money goes or how anything's funded. We're already paying a load of tax to supposedly support the green economy and for us to be less carbon-heavy and carbon-using, and yet you don't know where the money's going or what's being spent on.
Well, what I've suggested where the money should be spent. I've suggested it should be spent on greening the transport fleet and on insulating the housing stock.
Well, why don't, for example, if we were to offset every flight that we went on, how would that help the world?
Well, it all depends what projects it's invested in, but basically the aim of the project is to reduce the carbon emissions and thereby reduce global heating.
No, I know what the aim is, but what is the actual practical use of offsetting your flight by paying into a company a load of money?
Well, the money goes to setting up these projects to reduce carbon emissions.
But isn't it all a bit of a racket, though, Anthony? I mean, you must admit there's an awful lot of money going into these things, because mostly the only people who can afford to offset their holidays and their flights are people who've got quite a lot of money, right? So they're doing it to salve their own consciences. They're doing it to make themselves feel good, OK? All of which may be fine, but I don't see anybody kind of policing it. I don't know where you can find out where this money is going.
Well, there are the international bodies which supervise and report on all these things. Like who?
Yeah.
Like who? Hang on a minute.
Well, I mean, who can I call and say, could you please check this company out for me? Could you please tell me what projects they've been involved in?
Yeah, OK. There's the certified emissions reduction, gold standard certified emission reduction, gold standard verified emission reductions, and verified carbon standard certified credits, quality assurance standards for carbon offsetting. There's organisations all who look at these
and who
projects.
are they privately run? Are they government run?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest.
You see,
But
it seems to me. Listen,
that
Anthony, I'm sorry, I'm not having a go at you
scam.
here. I'm just saying that this whole industry seems to me to be set up, not policed very well, run on the sort of goodness of somebody's reputation, which may or may not be a good thing or a bad thing. But in the end, these things need to be policed properly. There's a lot of money involved.
You're absolutely right. I think I'll make that the next thing that I report on in the Sustainable
Excellent.
Futures report.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you've done it, would you come back on and talk to us about it? Because listen, I'm all in favour of people having a different view. I'm all in favour of you wanting to tell me about how dangerous the climate is going to become and all of that. However, I just think it's a bit hypocritical of some people to put money into a fund which they honestly don't really... I mean, Elton John couldn't care less if he gives about 1,500 quid away for a couple of flights to Nice, because it's nothing to him. He spent 250,000 quid on flowers one year, The point is that he's probably not going to worry about where that money goes. But if I was going to do it, I would want to know where the money was going.
Right. Well, I'll look into that.
OK, brilliant. Anthony, thank you very much indeed.